So I have been listening to the talks, and I just keep changing what my talk is over and over. And so I'm just going to give it a go. There are three main things I'm going to talk about. One is to introduce you to the Freelancers Union. The second is really to talk about the needs for a business model. And the third is a new political slogan that I'm not going to say until the end. So how many people here have, well, first of all, where's Stephen Greenhouse? Stephen, what are you going to be doing after you retire?
Maybe freelancing.
How many people here have freelanced at any time in their entire lives? Okay, hands down. How many people think that when and if they turn, well, after they turn, Kanahara, they turn 65, they will be working some kind of gigs? Okay. How many people who think that the young kids today, when they graduate from college, are going to get 40-hour work week job with full benefits and a major defined benefit retirement plan? Great. So we're on this. So Freelancers Union, in great frustration with the wonderful people at the Department of Labor, wanted to get a count on how many people are actually working in this way. And so we did a study with an employer, Elance Odesk, and found that it's 53 million Americans are working independently, 1 in 3 workers. But it's not so simple, because what we found was about 40% are really traditional independent contractors who are classified as independent contractors and are working in certain fields. But to me, the most interesting number was that 27% classified themselves as moonlighters, meaning I have a full-time job, I'm freelancing on the side. That really, to me, the moonlighters are the ones who are freelancing in the context of income inequality in America. They're just trying to get by. And so what's so important to see about this new workforce is that it is so absolutely not monolithic, that people are working in these ways for so many different reasons, some of them good and some of them bad. I think about 15 years ago, there was a big fight about contingent work. It's the precariat, and it's all bad. And it's really just about rapacious employers who are making this workforce happen. And I think a lot of people still think that. And I think there are a lot of employers who really fit that bill. But the truth is that the economy is shifting and work is just more flexible, and that the real strategy has to be to develop power to start talking about how are we going to make this new workforce fair. And I think that what is so interesting about that is that that to me is the crux of this, is that as the new work is evolving, the work is episodic, it's based on gigs, and so people don't get the benefit of, let's say, an unemployment check. So you can work a gig, the gig can last for 8 months, and when the gig is over, you're screwed. But we don't have another example of how to build in security. We could come up with all these things that would be under the they are screwed department, but I think that what we should start to see is that freelancers, I think, are starting to show us something about our lives, and why I was an enthusiastic clapper to Jessica's happiness argument is that I think people don't realize that freelancers are actually nationally on strike. And you can see that in the consumption numbers. Look at the consumption numbers that are coming out month after month. Then break it down by quintile, and you will not be surprised to find out that the top quintile, the people who are earning the most are spending the most. And if you take it as an average, consumption is up. But when you start to break it down by working people, you start to see consumption is not up. And when you start to look at the millennials and the next generation, and you start taking the same things, housing, car ownership, and you start to see this generation, they're not buying cars, they're sharing. They're not owning houses, they're renting. And people are starting to say, you know what, this loyalty thing, this 40-hour work thing, like whether I crave it or I don't, it's just not happening for me. So I'm going to keep my nuts small. I'm going to stop consuming. And I am going to start leading my life about time. It's going to be about my neighborhood. It's going to be about the people around me. It's going to be about love. And I think it doesn't get that kind of attention because it doesn't feel somehow weighty or meaty. So we call that the freelance 360 life, that people are really craving that sense of something greater and some larger purpose. We at Freelancers Union call the economic principles around that this idea of new mutualism, that I hope somebody comes up with a far better phrase, and do tell. And the idea is that we're really interconnected, that as we see the government spending decline, and that is a reality, and as we see the decline of some of the institutions that are important, that we're going to be recreating new ones, but that are based on interconnection, that are going to have a time horizon, that are 2 generations, 4 generations ahead, and that we can start building up our institutions. And it's interesting, earlier in the last panel, we said that what is the purpose of the labor movement? It is to build our communities. I would say, and I don't know how much time I have, so I can...
Keep going a little,
okay.
not a lot.
Okay, so it's not just about building our communities. It's, yes, that's true, but it's about building our economy. You know, let's look around us locally, let's look up and aside, let's look virtually, and let's just start to say that. Okay, boom, let me keep moving along. Okay, so number 1 is that's freelancers, that's where we're going. Business model. I think this is terribly important. Think of the work that David is doing. Freelancers Union, we believe that you have to have your own money in order to actually be able to move strategically. The revolution will not be foundation funded, and so you've got to start figuring out how you're going to do it. And I think that anybody that's going to say otherwise is just to say it completely full of shit. And so business model must be based on solidarity. There are 2 critical elements to solidarity. Spirituality and love is one. What do I mean by that? It's the sense that I am part of something greater than myself, that when I'm engaged in collective action, I can see the future, that there's something better. And if you talk to any psychologist, you know, the worst thing about depression is when people feel so alone. But the second part of solidarity is economic interconnection. And we must see that we have to build, you know, I had lunch or breakfast or something with Andy Stern, and he said, you know, it's all about money, because like once you have money, you can kind of figure stuff out, right? Who can't? So money really matters. Now this is the third one. And again, I think somebody has to come up with a better way to say it, but I really believe it. Okay, so remember James Carville, it's the economy, stupid? Well, it's the proletariat, stupid. And so I think what we have to stop doing is saying that this movement is going to be a movement of low-wage workers, high-wage workers, full-time workers. We are all in this together. And I think that at the Freelancers Union, I'm just going to ask another show of hands. How many people think that when you hear freelancer, you think like boutique, yoga, kale-eating, freelance journalist? Come on, it's more, admit it. Okay, we'll ask it another way. 3 years ago, before your consciousness was raised, how many people thought that? Oh, come on. 10 years ago, before your consciousness was raised, how many people thought that? Okay, much better. And so I just want to close by saying 2 quick things. One is John L. Lewis figured out how to organize when he had a president who built and enacted, really he had Francis Perkins, but let's be honest, and we developed Section 7 rights. And the government didn't create a government program. The labor movement had institutions with a revenue model that were able to take Section 7 rights and make it real. That man, John L. Lewis, mortgaged his building and invented unions. That's right, he was an entrepreneur who invented unions. And I think we have to go back to that. And let me just close this one other thing that I've really noticed, and I think will be evident, and I say this lovingly. But if you look at the experimenters in this field right now, they are all women. Not all, but so many. And I think that labor is a feminist cause for men and women, and the people that have been experimenting in this field are women, whether it's the domestic workers, the taxi cab driver, the teachers union, and I think that we need to start to recognize that, and I say this because my daughter is about to turn 15, and she's an unreconstructed 1970s feminist. And I see how much we are so fearful of talking about these things. It's like, remember George Lakoff, lean into the argument, right? We've not only leaned in, we've fallen in. It's like, stop already. Let's talk about what we really mean and say what needs to be said. And so let's be honest, let's be entrepreneurial, and let's build this movement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Christina.